Before she was a queen, before the Grammys, before the gowns and the standing ovations, Mary J. Blige was just a girl trying to survive, not survive the industry, not survive fame, survive life. Born in the unforgiving projects of Yonkers, New York, Mary didn't grow up with fairy tales. Her childhood wasn't soundtracked by laughter. It was filled with trauma, a father who disappeared, a home soaked in dysfunction, and worst of all, at just 5 years old, Mary was sexually abused, a secret she carried alone, in silence, with no one to save her. No therapy, no justice, just pain. By the time she was a teen, she had already learned how to numb herself. Cigarettes, alcohol, toxic crowds. But there was one thing she couldn't escape, that voice, raw, cracked, imperfect, but honest, soulful, and full of rage and longing that no studio polish could replicate. It wasn't trained to be perfect. It was trained by pain, and that voice found its way to Uptown Records. At just 21, she dropped What's the 411, a debut that didn't just shake the R&B world, it redefined it. Hip-hop met soul, edge met emotion. Women who had never seen themselves in Whitney or Mariah suddenly saw Mary. She wasn't polished. She wasn't groomed to please. She was broken, just like them, and she was real. But while the world celebrated her vulnerability, no one ever asked how she was holding it together. Because the truth was, she wasn't. Fame didn't heal Mary, it exposed her. The more successful she became, the more her trauma bled through. And the more it bled, the more people bought. The label didn't care about her healing. They cared about her hits. Pain was profitable, and that pain took on a new name, K-Ci Hailey. At first, their connection seemed like chemistry. Two rising stars, passionate, intense, but behind the closed doors, it was chaos. Mary has since spoken openly. The relationship was abusive, emotionally, physically, spiritually. He was jealous, controlling, violent. But for Mary, it felt familiar. Because when you grow up believing that love comes with pain, you mistake abuse for affection. K-Ci wasn't just her boyfriend, he was her label mate. That meant rehearsals, studio time, tours, always around, always watching. And even when the bruises weren't visible, the damage was. But she kept going, kept recording, kept performing, because the more she cried in her music, the more records she sold. My Life became her masterpiece, a classic. But behind every note was a cry for help the world sang along to, without ever hearing the scream beneath it. And the industry? Silent. They didn't step in. They didn't protect her, because the formula was working. Mary's suffering sold. Walking away from K-Ci wasn't just a breakup for Mary J. Blige. It was a resurrection. She had finally broken free from a relationship that nearly destroyed her, emotionally, physically, spiritually. But freedom didn't mean healing. The scars were still there, etched deep in her soul. So she made a decision. If she couldn't trust love, she'd trust the work. She got clean. She got sober. She poured herself into music again, but this time from a place of control. She started talking differently in interviews, standing taller, wearing more white, less black. Her pain was still present, but now it came with boundaries. She wasn't bleeding for anyone else's consumption anymore. And then came Kendu Isaacs. He was different, or at least that's how it looked. Not a fellow artist, not someone chasing the spotlight. Kendu was a businessman, calm, mature, older. He offered her stability, structure. He managed her career, yes, but also her calendar, her image, her life. He wasn't just her manager. He was her husband, her protector. In 2003, they got married. To the public, it was a success story. The broken girl from Yonkers had made it. Love had finally found her. She smiled more, laughed louder. There was a softness to her that fans hadn't seen in years. She even talked about how Kendu saved her, how he helped her rebuild her trust. But behind closed doors, something was off. Because while Mary had finally let herself feel safe, she didn't realize she was handing over the keys to everything. Kendu wasn't just managing her tours. He was managing her money, her contracts, her image. And slowly, that sense of protection began to twist into control. She was working harder than ever. Albums, tours, press. But the finances weren't adding up. Something didn't make sense. And then the truth started to come out. He was allegedly using her money, her blood, her work, her voice, to fund another life. Extravagant purchases, private accounts, affairs, lavish spending on another woman. While Mary was on stage, pouring her soul out to thousands, the man she trusted most was draining her dry. And when she filed for divorce in 2016, the betrayal wasn't just emotional, it was calculated. Kendu demanded spousal support, not just a little. He asked for $130,000 per month. Yes, you read that right. He claimed she had damaged his career, that she owed him for emotional distress. The same man who had lived off her success, now demanding to be compensated for the collapse of a marriage he broke. Mary later said in an interview, "He took everything. I didn't have control over anything. I was afraid." And once again, the industry, the same one that celebrated her comeback, her vulnerability, her hits, said nothing. No statements of support, no protection, no solidarity, because Mary's pain still sold, and no one in power had anything to gain from her healing. After the divorce, Mary J. Blige didn't just mourn the end of a marriage. She mourned the final thread of trust she had left in love. This wasn't her first heartbreak. It wasn't even her most violent one, but it was the one that broke her foundation, because it came from the person who had promised to protect what was most fragile in her. Her story. Her voice had always been about survival, but this time, surviving came at a cost she hadn't paid before, the death of hope. Because how do you move forward when the person managing your calendar is also managing your destruction? How do you open your heart again when the very thing you thought would heal you becomes another chapter in your trauma? Kendu didn't just leave with money. He left with pieces of her trust, her confidence, her identity as a woman who had finally believed she was worthy of being loved without conditions. And the industry? Once again, silent. The same platforms that rushed to cover the divorce drama, the court documents, the breakdowns on stage, never stopped to ask how she was doing as a woman, because Mary had become a brand, the queen of hip-hop soul, the voice of pain, the fighter, the comeback queen. She was valuable when she was vulnerable, profitable when she was suffering, relatable when she was hurting. But what happens when she wants to heal? That's where the real tragedy lies, because the industry didn't just take her money, her peace, or her past. It took away her freedom to grow beyond pain. It took away her right to evolve. And that's why lasting love never had a chance. Because every time Mary tried to soften, life, or the industry, reminded her that survival was safer than intimacy, that working was safer than resting, that being alone was safer than being vulnerable. And even as she continued to shine, with albums, acting roles, and accolades, there was a sadness that never quite left her eyes. She smiled, but only when she was ready. She opened up, but only when she was safe, because Mary J. Blige didn't just sing about heartbreak, she became the anthem. And now, years after Kendu, after K-Ci, after all the betrayals and silence, she stands, not broken, not bitter, but wiser, tougher, more guarded. She still believes in love, maybe, but she's no longer waiting for it to save her, Because in an industry that never protected her, Mary learned the most painful but powerful lesson of all. Sometimes, the only person who can love you the way you deserve is you. So, what do you think? Did Mary J. Blige simply choose the wrong men? Or was she set up from the start by an industry that was never built to protect her softness? Let us know your thoughts and opinions down below in the comments, and stay tuned for more true celebrity stories.